people don't realise in large part because they're not listening is that he's extremely practical and pragmatic when he talks about his alien abduction, when he talks about magic. It's all about the practical method to make something happen. In his completely insane and unreasonable way, he is actually completely reasonable and pragmatic about these things.
As he was starting to write The Invisibles, Morrison traveled to Kathmandu, and he had a completely transformative experience, something that he later termed an alien abduction.
Rather ultimately just say that all I've got to offer is that I'm a witness to the events of my life. That's all I know. I know fuck all else. No, why would I tell stories? All I've got is the truth in this world. To say this happened to me, what do you think that means? Because it happened, I saw the demon, I did that and this happened. I'm not lying, this isn't getting me money. I've got money, I'm doing well. If I shut up, I would be less, I'd have less crap thrown at me. But part of the experience I had was the compulsion to tell everybody. Because you've got to come back and say, look, what if this is? What if I'm right and the world isn't dying and it's actually just about to be born? So all I can offer is to say, I'm witnessing this shit. I did this, you could do this. Tell me what happened to you. Because if it's the same thing that happened to me, then we're onto something. Of assuming that I'd always just be in the same position, stuck in Glasgow with no money.
He left comics behind for a while to travel and experiment and to just see what life had to offer.
It took me till I was 30 to decide I'm going to start drinking, I'm going to start taking drugs, I'm going to see what life is like for other people. And so my whole life kind of blew apart, and I split up from the girl I was with and started doing all this other stuff.
When he broke with Judy and he went around the world and stuff like that, that's when he changed. That's when I noticed the change.
My original belief when in the 90s, when I had my experience, that everything was okay. And that we've not to be frightened because it's only part of something much bigger that will be wonderful. I'm starting to feel more real again. To believe that things are going to get better and that we will participate in things getting better is not to hand over to some father from the sky. I don't believe there's any father from the sky. I believe it's just us about to become something else. And if there's anything else out there that are not fathers, they're not mothers, or some other fucking weird thing that is, as I've tried to describe in the past, but can. Invitation to magic. I just did this thing to, okay, let me in, I want to be part of this. I was really cynical, I don't believe any of this stuff. I've never seen ghosts, I've never seen anything. My mother was quite witchy, she read tea leaves, but nothing of that seemed to have come through to me. I was just totally down-to-earth kid. I tried this ritual, I did the whole thing, I got the candles out, I did the magic words, I did the circle, I did the banishings and all that stuff. And I stopped and I went to bed, and then this thing happened when I was lying down. And right in front of me there was a kind of gravitational point in the air in the room which was drawing all the perspectives towards it as if there was a hole there or a crack. And there was the sense of black oil filling up the folds between the brain. I just freaked out and called in the gods of my mum and dad, Jesus, and they would get me out of this one. And the whole experience ended after a little bit. And then there was this vision of a lion's face which started to announce stuff. So it seemed pretty convincingly Crowleyan to me that I'd actually somehow activated whatever it was he was talking about. Become the character, I was wearing the clothes, I was going to the places, I was doing the things, I was doing the rituals, I was hanging out with the gods, and then putting it back in the comic, and then being affected by what was in the comic. So yeah, in terms of reality, that one was the actual deal. That one was bringing me to the verge of death.
When Grant was working on The Invisibles, he got sick right around the time that character got sick.
Just after King Mob had been convinced by the bad guys that he'd been given a necrotizing fasciitis bacteria that was eating through his face, I suddenly get this huge boil on my face, and within 3 days it's enormous, distorted my entire feature.
I remember him saying, Steve, look at this, and he pulled his ear back, and there was this hideous kind of green, crusty kind of crater thing behind his ear, and he'd got no idea what it was.
I was getting fevers and having these shakes and wrigglers, and then freezing. I just couldn't get up anymore, and I lay in front of the fireplace in my house.
I mean, he thought he was going to die. I mean, he broke down in tears, and he was delirious, man, delirious.
And suddenly this giant column of light comes through the door. And bear in mind I'm hallucinating, but this was one of the most amazing hallucinations I've ever had. And it's Jesus. The first thing he said was the thing I put in the comic. Just this voice suddenly announced itself I am not the God of your fathers, I am the hidden stone that breaks all hearts. So then he said to me, okay, you're about to die now, but you don't have to die. And I said, well, I really don't want to die. What do I have to do? And he said, well, if you want to stay here, you have to work for us. You know, you have to spread the light, whatever that means.
Those issues of the Invisibles that came out of the hallucinatory experiences he had on his sickbed.
And it really felt like I'd been through something that was very closely attached to the comic. That was my shamanic experience, that was my trial, my encounter with death, like I'd forced all my characters to go through.
Things that Morrison's known for is his interest in magic, specifically chaos magic. The idea that by believing in something, you can make it real. He'll talk about the rituals he'll perform, and then seeing if they produce results in the real world. And for Morrison, they have.
You would look at things one way, but he would always look at them from some other abstract dimension. Or imagine it this way. You know, I mean, he always had that.
First time I tried a magic ritual, I was 19, and I'd been given a book by my Uncle Billy, who was interested in Crowley, and he was the same guy who sort of gave me my first comic books. So he was a big formative influence. So I was kind of a disempowered kid. So I felt I wanted something that would give me some agency in the world. And magic seemed like a pretty cool thing to try out. I wasn't just going to read a bunch of books. I would have to interact with Voodoo Loa to see how it felt, so that I could do it in a way that was actually honest. By mistake, this one night I found myself in the Palace of the Scorpion Gods. And it was horrible, just these big things with kind of human faces on bodies. They would tell me I had to get a tattoo at the base of my spine with a scorpion on it, which I gave to King Bob. You know, the things that anyone could do. Anyone can contact Scorpion gods, anyone can talk to John Lennon or Mickey Mouse or Ganesh.
He was talking about how one time he healed his cat, you know, and when I had a bad experience in my life, the first person I called was Grant, because I was like, I wanted us to do magic. And we did magic over the phone, and I think it worked. I believe in my heart it worked.
Comes out, and it's obviously hugely influential. But if you look at the Matrix, a lot of the details, the style of the Matrix, and a lot of the cosmology of the Matrix basically comes from the Invisibles.
Holy shit, you know, this is the same story. They're wearing the same clothes that I'm currently sitting watching this wearing. But the first thing I remember about it is just how much I loved it and thought, what a great movie. And then kind of 2 days later, I was thinking, fuck bastards, you know, they got really rich by doing my stuff.
I think the Matrix owes Grant Morrison everything. Did I just say that? Wow, I just said that.
And then a little bit after that, I thought, no, this is what you wanted. This was the whole idea of doing the Invisibles, the hyper sigil, so this would catch on, and weird Gnostic ideas would get out into the general populace and make them think differently. After that, I realised, yeah, I opened up people to these ideas and they didn't care. You know, it didn't change anything. It didn't create a world of Gnostic superheroes yet.
In February of 2000, I organized an event in New York called the DisinfoCon. Douglas Rushkoff gave the keynote speech. I spoke, Paul Lothley, Robert Anton Wilson, and Grant, who I knew would pull out the stops.
At that point in the day, and they were starting to fall asleep, so I came on and screamed at them all to wake them up. And it was also because I was nervous, you know, it was a big thing to go on and talk for 45 minutes with no notes, nothing. Okay, I'm pissed, and in half an hour I'm going to come up on drugs to watch for it.
But it was great because his tongue was loose, and he improvised an amazing 40-minute speech, which is kind of a classic.
You've got your notebook and something new has just come into your head, and it's like the head is on fire. It's like some neuronal activity that's orgasmic, you know, it's the best feeling you can get. And everything's coming, there's all these connections and it's new things and everything feels fresh and you get a name for something and then you get chapter titles and it all starts to fold together. I hear them talking and they're talking and they're saying it in their voices. When I don't hear that, I have to reconstruct it just as a writer using writerly tools. You know, I don't think anybody would ever know the difference, but for me it's not as good as when you start to hear, oh god, there's Scott Summers, and it sounds just like Scott Summers, click right that. That to be the experience of the people who read the comic as well. Hopefully sometime in 2010 they'd be sitting there wearing their own clothes that they've been inspired by, and suddenly they'd be the ones who were being contacted and who were having the experiences, and who would then become the next generation of spear carriers who would then come back and inspire me. Done before. And that became kind of the meat of the comic. Back early in the 90s I was doing the whole tranny thing and going out and dressing like that just to see what that would be like.
If I'd gone over the edge as much as I might be institutionalised, I'd be gone.
You know, when I talked about the first demon or angelic experience, it came across as a very slight visual distortion. on drugs you had the demon in the room, you know, with its multiple heads, 10 tails and flailing barbs. In 1993 I went on a tour for some of the early Vertigo stuff. I was there with Steve Yo and Jill Thompson. Then we went on to the 50 years of LSD celebrations, which were going on in San Francisco that night.
Someone said, "You guys want to go to this rave tonight?" Dance and dance and dance, you feel the music.
Just having a good time, really.
And suddenly out of this night came, hey, let's do a comic together. Come on, hey, let's save the world. So I tried to come up with something that encompassed all the stuff that interested me, the fashion, the music, the mythology, the counterculture stuff. But something like the Invisibles is the ritual, it is the spell.
And he actually taught his readers in the letters page how to perform sigils.
And it's a really good entry into magic because it's very simple. So I picked up on it because it seemed to be something that worked. To construct a simple sigil, write down your desire in the form of a sentence, then take out the repeated letters, take out the vowels, and you'll be left with a string of consonants. Then take those consonants and rearrange them and mash them together until you've got something which doesn't look like your original sentence, which is its own little glyph. The idea is that you activate the sigil, and that's where it gets to be fun.
Look at that sigil, meditate on it, and masturbate.
While you're staring at the sigil and at the peak, pour all your concentration into it, and hopefully and generally you will find that the thing you wanted roll slowly into your life.
He says something and then somehow events align themselves to make it what he's after.
I used to just do them to meet people and to kind of get off with girls.
For the most part, has been to say, it's really easy, you just do this and results will happen. I did it and it happened for me.
And that's what I was interested in, the nuts and bolts of it, not whether it's an angel or a demon, because I don't believe in angels or demons, to tell the truth. I believe there are things that we can manifest as angels and demons or project onto, and really all magic is about is enchanting the apparent chaos or, you know, of ordinary matter around us with meaning.
There's probably nobody on earth you want to learn more about magic or expanding your consciousness than Grant Morrison.
Probe what that meant and what had just happened, what was going on in my brains through the Invisibles.
When he's talking about alien abduction, it's more of a metaphor of an awakening, of an awareness, of a sense of the layers of reality. And I think that's the same experience that we can get from reading his comics. It seemed to darken, and you could see it in the comics.
Because the Invisibles was so kind of druggy utopian, and I got to the end of it and I thought, you're not dealing with the reality of some people's lives. In fact, you're not even dealing with the reality of your own life, because I was finishing off the Invisibles and at the same time one of my cats is dying with cancer and dragging herself about and shitting on the floor, and I hadn't gone out with anybody for a year, so I was in this weird kind of celibate space, listening to the music from 2001: A Space Odyssey over and over. The whole sequence where Hal was dying, that was my favourite shit. It was just a nightmare.
There's a little bit less hope eternal to what he's writing, and a little bit more, here's where things have been left.
The whole 21st century I found really difficult after 9/11, and stuff like just seeing people on the internet. I thought outside there was these beautiful outsiders just waiting to change the world.
Morrison wrote Final Crisis, which was intended to be DC's big event book. It's about these superheroes who are trying to fight against this overwhelming evil. And even though it sold well, readers would go online and complain about how the series didn't make any sense.
And there was like a school of like real animus, real hostility. Like, how dare you make me think?
You know, I wanted them to be saved, I wanted them to be star children, and suddenly I saw the ugly, yawping faces, and it was such a downer, such a terrible downer.
I'm a super fan of Final Crisis. People complain that it's super fragmented and you can't tell what's going on, but I think the feeling of like if the entire dimension had been invaded, nobody would know what was going on. Shit would be moving really fast. He doesn't give you the information, but he gives you the feeling.
You know, in Final Crisis, the internet, it seemed practically went to war over it. There were people on one side saying, this is genius, this is groundbreaking, progressive, and other people saying, this is gibberish, I have no idea what's going on, this is unfair, you shouldn't be allowed to do this. On incest, I kept trying out and doing things, it's just weird stuff you can't explain, but you look back at it and say, okay, something happens when you start on that path and you start thinking that way and you start doing these things. The world seems to adapt a little bit around about. In the hospital watching this green light all night, just imagining that it was some kind of alien intelligence studying me as I lay in my bed of sick. The same thing when you see the kid sitting in his parents are playing guitars and singing.
Well, they always reckoned Flex Mentala was based on Grant Spanner. Walter.
All that's real, you know, like wanking off to drawing supergirls in the nude. You know, as I would do when I was a young teenager. It was, you know, without a girlfriend, so you draw superheroes, like getting off with each other and stuff. 2001: A Space Odyssey 3 times. She took me to astronomy classes. Then she took me out one night in the cold, pointed at the star Sirius, and said, "Son, that's where we come from." With no explanation, and just left me to deal with that.
Flex Mentallo, it was just this brilliant, complicated idea that he had about story and fact and fiction, and how the two are kind of the same thing.
After childhood, I got to 12 years old, my parents split up, and that kind of fucked with my head a little bit. And at the same time, I made the horrible mistake of I got a scholarship to go to a boys' school, and I thought this was a great idea when I was 12, and then when I was 14 I was going crazy. I was climbing the walls because I wanted to meet girls, and there was just no way of meeting girls. So what happened to me after this kind of interesting, happy, petty childhood was that I had the worst teenage years. When I finally got out of the boys' school, I was like fucking 19, you know, and I hadn't even been near a girl. And I thought I was just never.
Zenith Synopses, he was referring to his own research into magic.
People would come in and say, "I've split up with my boyfriend," and I'd pull out the tarot cards, and I didn't even read tarot cards, I just used to wing it, and it tended to work. I like Gordon Gowdy, he lost a guitar.
This guitar, which was the only guitar I had, I got stolen from the Glasgow School of Art. Grant says, "I'll do magic and I'll get your guitar back."
I had this click in my head, which I always had this super certainty when I knew magic was going to work. And it came on in my head, and I just said, "Oh no, you'll find it within a couple of days and it'll be very close to the house." I had no idea, I was absolutely sure.
I can't disbelieve the thing. I was like, yeah, the guitar's still not here. And Vladdy Bang goes, "It's really close, it's really close."
And a couple of days later, he discovered the guitar hanging in the window of a pawn shop, like right round the corner from where he lived, so he was able to retrieve it. How did I meet Kristen? It was Mark Miller's fault. Mark's wife was sort of friendly with Kristen, so she'd come back and she said to Mark, "Well, there's a girl in my office who's really into this stuff that Grant's into. She reads Philip K. Dick and she wears sort of fetish clothes and goes out to these clubs, and the two of them should meet." But we did meet, and Kristen's boyfriend at the time was this like 6'5" Matrix dude. I befriended the two of them, but obviously I kind of fancied her. But she had a boyfriend, and her boyfriend could kill you just by looking at you. I invited them to a birthday party I was having. So she turned up, and we were getting on, it was pretty cool. So I kind of went home and did this huge ritual to Aphrodite to bring me the person I need. And I'm really nuts, you know. I said, "Please, I'll just bring me who I need, someone I need, someone I need." And 3 days later the phone goes and it's Kristen. She invited me out, and I went out and she told me she split up from her boyfriend, and we just got together that day, and that's been it ever since. You know, it was really fairy tale-ish. Accidental materialism would be to say, "Okay, you guys, if you don't believe in magic, let's just talk about what science says is factual." And in all of those factual things, you will find gaps that are so immense and psychedelic and bizarre and weird that it's much more interesting. And we don't need the supernatural. We can actually do magic purely using the nuts and bolts and the concrete elements of the world that we live in. It's the stuff your friends can't say, "Oh, you're only tripping." No, you're not only tripping. We came out of a star, we came out of a big bang, it's still happening. Everything became magic, and everything flowed in a very different way, and it was a lot more grounded. It seemed ludicrous to frame it as magic now, because it actually just seemed like reality. Magic seemed like the fashions, the clothes you wear when you're young to try and be cool. I'd just been wearing those clothes to get to this place of understanding, which is really very like, "Oh, it's just that? Well, that's kind of cool." It's a simultaneous, it's just that, but oh my god, it's that.
Kristen and Grant got married in the mid-2000s. Ultimately, they bought a house together in Scotland, and it was this isolated house where he could just totally work on his creative endeavors.
1863, that's when I was great, which is quite cool. A lot of stuff, it was just so, you know, I knew we were going to stay here.
It's really, really awesome old mansion. The view is pretty spectacular, and they're restoring it like room by room.
This isn't narcissism.